In this video, we're covering long-run supply. And so we're going to look at when long-run supply is constant, when it's increasing, and when it's decreasing. Here, I'm just going to give you sort of a brief overview of when this might be. We're not going to focus on long-run supply quite as much. It's sort of the result of any analysis using the perfectly competitive market model. For the most part, though, what you'll notice is that many of the examples we work with will result in a constant cost industry. So this constant cost industry is just where the long run average cost is constant no matter what the output level. And what it results in is a long run supply curve that is horizontal, as you can see pictured on the slide. All right, so if you look at the video with the examples of using the perfectly competitive market model, where we examined, in particular, examples 1 and 2, where there was an increase in demand and a decrease in demand. In both of those, what you should have noticed is that the market returned to the same price that it was in the beginning, right? So initially we would have had, right, something like this, right, our initial equilibrium. Let's say we had a positive demand shock that would shift demand out and to the right, which would result for a producer in a positive profit. And then in the long run, we would have seen producers respond by entering in response to that positive profit, pushing the price back down to its original level. Okay, so that would have been the price dynamic that we would see up and then back down. So if we were to connect our initial long run equilibrium and our second, what we would get is the long run supply curve for the firm, and that's going to be that horizontal curve as you see pictured on the slide. Okay, if you want additional examples, the marginal revolution video that I've linked in the slides is very good, so I recommend checking that out. Next, we'll have increased cost industries. These are going to be industries that are characterized by long-run average costs that increase with industry output. So as more is produced, excuse me, the costs of production go up, right? So this is likely going to be due to things like in the car industry or in the oil production industry, where anyone who's in that industry is competing over a very scarce input, right? So steel, right? If we think about the input for cars of steel, the automobile industry makes up a very large portion of the demand for that product. So as car manufacturers increase the number of cars that they're making, that's going to drive up the price of steel. So the more that's made on the market, the more costly that good is going to be to produce. And so that's why we would see in the long run the increasing costs, and it would be an upward sloping supply curve like that shown on the slide. Again, I've linked in marginal revolution video on increasing cost industries, where they go into several examples, much better than I would be able to here. So I've linked that for you if you would like to watch it. And then finally, we have decreasing cost industries, and these will be industries that are characterized by long-run average costs that fall with output. And one thing to note is that the fall in costs is not going to be sustained. So if you look at the image included on the slide here, there's only a portion of this supply curve that is actually downward sloping. It might actually be more like this if we were to try to draw those sections a little better. So only that portion of the supply curve is actually downward sloping. At a certain level of output, that supply cost of producing is going to go back up. A reason that an industry might enjoy decreasing costs is essentially due to really intense economies of scale and returns to production, or excuse me, returns to scale. So take, for instance, the market or the industry, the carpet industry in Dalton, Georgia. There's this weird thing that happened where all of the carpet manufacturers in Dalton just happened to locate, or sorry, all of the carpet manufacturers in the US happened to locate in Dalton, Georgia. And what it's meant is that if you go to university, say in that area, they have classes that are and majors that are specifically aimed to train people to produce carpet, right? So what that means is that in that location, the cost of production for carpet producers is actually much lower than in other places because they have this highly specialized labor that they can draw on coming out of those universities. All right, and that's going to give them increasing returns to scale, as well as likely some very good economies of scale. And that's what's going to give us this supply curve with a partially downward slope in the middle. And finally, Marginal Revolution has a good video on decreasing costs that I would recommend if you're interested in this topic further. Here, we're going to go ahead and pause, and then the final video for this lecture will go over economic rent in the perfectly competitive market model.